Hey everybody. In today's video, I'm going to go over a very common and sometimes frustrating issue when working with Power Query. In this example, I've got a table of Glassdoor reviews, and I'm going to load this into Power Query. To do that, just go to the Data tab and select From Table or Range. It'll automatically detect the table I'm on and load that into Power Query, so I don't have to do any selections or adjustments. So it's loaded in here. I'm not going to do any changes here. I'm just going to hit close and load, and now Power Query is going to load this back into Excel into its own tab. So it's just going to take a little bit to download nearly 500,000 rows here, and then once it's done, I'm going to show you how this can go, how you can run into issues when you're refreshing the data. Because one common problem is that, even if you make a slight change to these names, these titles, these headers, you can run into an issue when you're doing a refresh because, Power Query is going to look for those headers and it's going to error out. I'm going to show you why that happens and how you can get around this. So it's almost done loading here. And once it's done, what I'm going to do is adjust just a few of these headers to show you the error that you probably have come across if you've done this. Alright, so it's finished loading. We've got that table in there already. Now what I'm going to do is just get rid of these underscores. So for job title, date review, and then column label. So I'm just going to delete those. And now when I go to data, refresh all, I'm going to get an error saying the column underscore label of the table wasn't found, right? So obviously that underscore missing now is saying that that's not found because this is column underscore label. I've got column space label. So let's take a look at why this is causing a problem. So I'm going to right click, edit this query. And the problem lies on this change type step, because you can see at this source download right now, there's not any issue right now. See, it's downloaded my job title with the space. The column label is fine. And, date review, I've got rid of the underscore. It's still fine. But the problem is, anytime you load data into Power Query, by default, you're going to have this change type step applied. And, this is a step that I don't know is terribly useful a lot of the time. By default, it goes through every single one of your columns and tries to detect the data type, make a change accordingly. And for me, this is in many cases an unnecessary step because I may not need to change the data type. By default, it may be fine. If I want to go ahead and change it, then I can do so manually. I certainly don't need this step by default, because the problem that this creates is now you can see, unlike an Excel formula, in Power Query, this stuff is hard coded in here. So you can see we've got column label in here. It's got column underscore label. So if I were to adjust this in here, now it's going to tell me the next one is the date underscore review. So the column label is no longer an issue because I've edited it within the Power Query formula in here. So this is why using this change type step can be troublesome, especially if you want to adjust your headers or make small changes like that can prevent your data from refreshing. So what you can do is, if you're like me, you don't think the step is terribly necessary, you can just remove it with that X, you're done. And now close and load. And now it's not going to cause an issue when you're doing that refresh, because now that step is gone. So that hard-coded formula is no longer there. See, now it's refreshing the data again. It didn't prompt me to say that something wasn't found, because you can change the name of your headers when loading the data into Power Query. That's not an issue. The only time it becomes a problem is if you've got a formula in Power Query, such as that change type step, that's looking for those hard-coded header names. If you get rid of that, then it's a lot easier to work with Power Query. And now you can certainly change your data types as you need to. If you've got a number field showing up as text, obviously it's something you'd probably want to change to make sure it's calculating properly. But do you really need to rename every single or categorize every single column? I don't know that you do. So it's a step that I think can cause more headache than it adds value for. So if you're running into issues refreshing data, especially if you get that message saying it can't find a header, I would say look for that change type step, because that could be causing you some headaches there, and that could be the reason why, even though your Power Query is all set up fine, there's no reason it should be erroring out. That could be causing the problem. Anywhere you've got hard coded Power Query formulas in there, that's where you could potentially be running an issue, especially if you've changed the headers, even an underscore a, even an extra space. If it's not an exact match, you'll run into an error. So just wanted to point that out. If you're using Power Query, pay attention to that change type step, and if you don't need it, remove it. Otherwise, be cognizant of the fact that your headers need to stay the same, or you have to factor in for that when you're doing your refresh to make sure you don't run into those errors.